Here we are, in Cornwall, in the Celtic fringes of the far southwest of Britain, and this is the folklore, myths and legends from the end of the land. Let's go. Welcome back, my friends. I've just got back from a trip to Cornwall. We spent a few days exploring the end of the land and visiting various places associated with Cornwall's folklore, myths and legends. So we've got a few stories for you today. Tales of giants and mermaids, stories of pirates and pixies, angels and devils, and of course, King Arthur himself, the main man, who of course was born in Cornwall. So I've made a list of all the folk tales in this video in the description, and they're all time-stamped, so you can have a peruse through there if you want and go to the bit of folklore that interests you. It's your life, after all, do what you want with it. Or you can watch this whole video in order and follow our little journey around the end of the land with the dog and a tent. Cornwall's very interesting because it is cut off from the rest of mainland Britain by the River Tamar and has a language barrier as well. The Cornish language died out only in the 19th century, but it's now been revived. A lot of folklore in Cornwall is different from what you would see in Devon or Somerset or up here in Wiltshire. Slight variant on a lot of things. So pixies are called piskies and have a slightly different nature, for example. We'll get onto them later. Cornwall also has its own flag, the flag of St. Piran, the patron saint of miners. St. Piran was an Irish Christian that was lobbed into the sea off a cliff in Ireland by pagans who didn't like this newfangled Christian religion. But miraculously, the millstone round his neck intended to drown him floated, and he floated all the way to Cornwall and started converting the pagans over there. So the Cornish flag, the flag of St. Piran, the black stands for the rich seams of tin ore. Cornwall, famous for tin mining, and the white stands for clotted cream. No, it doesn't really. It stands for the molten tin that St. Piran extracted from the iron ore. And that's why he is the patron saint of tin miners. Never go down a dark hole in the ground without offering a prayer to St. Piran. Much better day today. Time to go exploring Cornwall. So, let's get stuck in. Our first stop in this journey round Cornwall was to St. Ives, a delightful town on the north coast of Cornwall. And it was swarming with emmets. Emmets is a Cornish word for ants. It describes tourists and holidaymakers that descend on Cornwall during the summertime, just like us. Modern tat. Mythos. Salad. Here we are in St. Ives, Cornwall. So I have a bit of a Cornish riddle for you. It is this. As I was on my way to St. Ives, I met a man with 7 wives. Each wife had 7 sacks, and each sack had 7 cats, and each cat had 7 kits. So, the riddle is, how many were on the way to St. Ives? Wives, sacks, kittens, and cats. Write your answers in the comment section below. So St. Ives is named after St. Ive, an Irish saint, another Irish Christian missionary. So this is the holy well of Saint Aya. Now, according to legend, Aya was an Irish missionary in the pagan times when Britain and Ireland were mainly pagan. And she decided to sail off with 2 other missionaries to Cornwall to convert the people there to Christianity. But they left without her, so she got down on the beach in Ireland and prayed. And then she saw a little clover in the sea, and it grew and grew and grew into a coracle, and she stepped into it, and it carried her over the waves, miraculously sped over the wave tops in this little green coracle, overtaking the ship with the missionaries in it that she was meant to go with, and landed on the shores of Cornwall, right where St Ives is today. And she founded the Tate Modern there and began her mission. And according to legend, she struck the hillside with her staff and fresh water sprang out of it. So interesting little tale of St Ives there, almost exactly mirroring the tale of St Piran that came before her. A lot of these early Christian stories, these Celtic Christian stories, have a sense of the miraculous and wonder about them, which is kind of specific to Celtic Christianity. You often wonder if some of the old religion, some of the Druidic or Celtic polytheism has segued its way into these early saint stories because they're so magical and miraculous. So, the answer to the riddle earlier, how many sacks, wives, kits and cats were on their way to St Ives? The answer is, of course, 1, the teller of the riddle. The man, whether or not he had his wives and their sacks and their cats and their kits with him, was heading the other way, of course. The other way is Zennor, which is exactly where we're heading, where there's a bit of folklore about mermaids. Let's go. Here we are in Zennor, home of the Zennor mermaid. Pretty. For this day and age.
That's American, isn't it? You're more welcome to try both guys to see what you need first.
Yeah, go on. Can I have a go on both? Is that all right? Thanks, mate.
29 minutes and 12 seconds. All right.
That's so precise. Here we are at the Tinner's Arms pub in Zennor, Cornwall. And we're on the trail of a certain mermaid. Wonder where she is. This footpath that I'm walking now is the old coffin road. The road of the dead, if you like. This is the way that all the coffins would have come from the surrounding hamlets and farms to the church of Zennor for burial. Going over a very local style of cattle grid here. Still littered with old granite boulders. Lobbed by giants. There's one coming up called the Giant Stone, actually. Plenty of folklore of giants at the end of the land here in Cornwall. We'll hear more giant tales shortly. Absolutely beautiful Saturday afternoon. Summer solstice tomorrow, where historically the great beacons would have been lit on the hills, like in many parts, Celtic-speaking parts of Britain, with a relic, an echo, a remnant of the great pagan feast days. This, incidentally, is the road that the man with 7 wives would have been taking. He would have been going that way to St Ives. And the Riddler would be heading this way to Zennor, possibly to see a man about a mermaid. Wouldn't want to put a foot down there, would you? Break an ankle. I'm not manifesting that. Incidentally, how many kittens did that man have in his various sacks? 7 wives, 7 sacks, 7 cats, and each one had 7 kits. How many kits is that? What's 7 times 7 times 7? Is that right? Write your answer in the comments below. I'm going to go and have a lie down on that rock. Oh, perfect. Boy. Oh, that's lovely. I guarantee you there is some local folklore about that. Maybe a giant has grazed his ball bag against it, thereby creating that cleft. Who knows? There it is. The famous church at Zennor. Home to a wooden chair, a church pew with a carving of a famous mermaid, the Mermaid of Zennor. It's amazing, there's no one here. This place completely to myself. Tam's already raced ahead to the church to do some rubbing. Kernow. Almost. Should be paying attention to where I'm going really, rather than talking to you lot. Here we go. Very last cattle grid. And we are in the town of Zennor. Hello, you two.
Hello.
Are you getting some rubbing done?
Yes.
How about you, Mira?
He meet.
You meet death.
So,
He met death. Here it is. The famous mermaid chair of Zennor. The mermaid that inspired a legend. This is the famous mermaid chair of the church at Zennor. So, there's a particular piece of folklore attached to this chair, which is, of course, about a mermaid. Here is that story. Long ago, there was a young lad who attended church here. His name was Matthew Truhella. He was the son of the church warden, and he was a bell ringer, rang the bell here at the church so people would come to Sunday service. Now Matthew, he was very popular in the village of Zennor. He was a very handsome young man, but that wasn't the reason he was so popular. He had the voice of an angel, and every Sunday he would sing in the choir And the sound of his song would drift across the village, across the hills, drift down to the beach and over the waves. The old men and old women of the village used to say that his voice could charm a mermaid. Well, of course, my friends, that's exactly what happened. No good will come of it, said the old women of the village. So one Sunday, when Matthew had rung the church bell and the whole congregation had arrived from all the little farms and hamlets around Zennor, and Matthew, as usual, was singing his little heart out. His little pipes were going, and the sound was so beautiful. This day, a stranger came to church, a young woman. She was beautiful. She had green eyes and long, curly, golden hair, and a cloak, very, very strange, old style, a cloak of silver that went right down to her feet with a silver brooch holding it together. Beautiful thing. And she came and sat in silence at the back of the church and sang the most beautiful song. And she came and sat in silence at the back of the church and just listened to Matthew's song, entranced. And then, before anyone could speak to her or even ask her name, she was gone. This happened Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. The same mysterious girl with green eyes came. And then, one day, she would sit closer and closer and closer to our Matthew. Then one Sunday, as Matthew was singing his song at the top of his voice, she too started singing, and they had a duet together singing, and their combined songs just sort of soared and made the most beautiful sound. It was like a kind of a love language between them. They sang back and forth together. And after this was done, Matthew tried to, strike up a conversation with her, but she just turned quickly, as she always did, and left the church, and she was gone. She went in the direction of the sea. No good will come of it, said the old folk of the village. You see, they remembered when they were children, their grandparents telling them a story of a green-eyed stranger that would sometimes appear in the church and sing the most beautiful song, but then she would disappear, and sometimes she would be gone for years at a time. And when she returned, she was always the same age. And now she had returned, and she had taken a liking to their choir boy, their Matthew. Sure enough, Matthew had fallen head over heels for this green-eyed stranger that would come and sing duets with him every Sunday. And one Sunday, when she turned on her heel and left the church, he followed her. And he was never seen again. Last seen walking down to the beach and into the sea. For many years after Matthew disappeared, vanished from the land, sometimes a bell could be heard ringing beneath the sea. It's like he still had the bellboy in him. The bell beneath the sea was presumably one of the sunken chapels of Lyonesse, the drowned land of Lyonesse that exists beyond Cornwall. So, my friends, that is the story of the Mermaid of Zennor. Different kind of mermaid story to the ones we sometimes hear. And it is said that this chair was carved as a response to that folk tale. Or was the folk tale inspired by the chair? Given the story is a piece of the oral tradition, it's probably impossible to say, but nice to see a slightly more benevolent mermaid in the Cornish tradition. This mermaid, as you can see, has a comb and a looking glass. Typically in the medieval era, when you see mermaids in churches, they represent vanity, one of the deadly sins. But maybe this one has a slightly different meaning. Look, it's bolted to the wall, so no one nicks the mermaid. Tam's taking a rub in. What does it say? Michael Bublé?
It says bubble, but they've actually fixed it
With an extra B?
extra B
That's so
and a
cute.
little...
I don't think Shakespeare would be happy with that, it's his word. These are the famous church bells, once rung by our bellboy, Matthew, up to the bell tower. It's an incredibly peaceful place, this. You know, some spaces just have a sense of tranquility and goodness to them, and this is one. It's been a Christian hermitage for a very, very long time. So, a lot of folklore about mermaids paints them as quite not necessarily good creatures. They're not always malicious, but they can be dangerous. This is not so much the case in Cornwall, where they are somewhat more benevolent. There's an old Cornish phrase that says that just as a mermaid is human or female from the head to the heart and the rest is fish, so it is with Jesus Christ, who is human from the head to the heart. The rest is divine. He's got God legs, apparently. Maybe that's why the sign for Christ is the fish. Where are all the people? Portal.
Ling.
Oh, there it is. First one to spot a mermaid wins. I don't know, a mirror and a comb. Blimey, look at the size of that gunnerer. Mira's having a little swim down there. Here it is. Ah. Dragons. Cornish dragons. Otherwise known as a pheasant. Up. No. No.
I nearly went there. Should we go like...
Oh, I feel really bad now we've upset those pheasants. Right, Tamsin's gone right into a deep hole in the ground. Deep into a hole in the ground. We've disturbed a nest of pheasants. It feels like we're not going to go any further. That's what my instinct is saying anyway. Might go as far as that little bit of wall there and no further. So no swim for me today. Is it that pint, babe? Oh, fucking hell, look at that. This secluded bay, about a mile below the village of Zennor. This is the route that our Matthew took, following that green-eyed girl, that mermaid, into the sea. So this place is very, very rich in folklore, and local tradition says that this bay is enchanted. On summer evenings, evenings just like this evening, if lovers come down to the bay and listen very quietly, sometimes they can hear the song of the mermaids singing. Our story is not yet over. Many years after the story of Matthew and the mermaid, at this very bay down here, a ship had put down anchor in this bay here. And then, to the astonishment of the crew, a mermaid appeared, just surfaced, and called up to the crew of the ship and said, "Excuse me, kind sailors, could you please hoik up your anchor a little bit, because it is blocking the doorway to my home, and I need to get home and feed my children. My husband is going to get home soon." Now, sailors being a superstitious lot and often fearful of mermaids that can cause storms and all kinds of mischief, they immediately pulled up that anchor. Now, one of those sailors aboard that ship that was right here, he happened to be from Zennor, right here. And he said, "What is the name of your husband?" Because he knew the story of Matthew, the singer that had gone off to be with the mermaid. And that mermaid answered, "His name is Matthew." And as that ship sailed round the coast, there were not one, but two mermaids waving them off. And when that sailor returned to the town of Zennor, to the Tinner's Arms to have a pint, he told everyone the story. So everybody knew that Matthew was safe. He had married a mermaid and had become one of them. And, my friends, legend has it that on long summer evenings like this one, if two lovers come down to this very cove and pay very close attention, they can sometimes hear the song of the mermaids rising from beneath the waves. So according to legend, sometimes, even in fairly recent history, mermaids have been spotted sat on that rock there. Not today. Goodbye, Mermaid Cove. Till next time. I suppose I don't want to really be charmed by a mermaid. I am married. The sunken kingdom of Lyonesse. Many tales of sunken lands in the island of Britain, perhaps distant memories of sea level rises. One of the most famous is the story of Lyonesse. Now, this was a kingdom that once extended from Land's End, from the very tip of the land, where there is a really rubbish tourist destination now where we didn't go to. But once upon a time, you could go beyond Land's End, past the little Land's End sign there, onto the rocks, and there was a narrow strip of land that led out into another very low kingdom that stretched many, many, many miles in the southwesterly direction. And it had churches, villages, towns, hamlets, about 140 parishes, and it had a king. One of Cornwall's most famous folk tales, the story of Tristan and Isuelt. In some versions of that story, Tristan is from the sunken kingdom of Lyonesse. He is its rightful heir, and he could never claim its kingdom because it sunk under the waves when he was in the service of King Mark. The story of Tristan and Isuelt I've told on this channel before. I'll put a link to it here. Now, according to the stories, one year, some say it was the year 1090, which would be after the Norman conquest, there was a great storm and the sea defences of Lyonesse were overrun and the waves lapped up and swallowed the whole kingdom. And only one man escaped. He was a knight. Trevelyan was his name, and as he saw the waves approaching towards his keep and the whole sea overrunning the whole land of Lyonesse, he got on his white horse, no time for a saddle, and rode bareback ahead of the waves, all the way past Land's End, and a great wave came and knocked his horse off its feet, and it swam and swam. He thought he was finished, but finally it found its footing on the rocks of Land's End and trotted into Britain. He was the only one to escape with his life. And his symbol, the white horse riding on the crest of the waves, is still the symbol of the House of Trevelyan that are somewhere near Penzance, which is where my mum's family are originally from many generations ago. The drowned land of Lyonesse sometimes features in other folk tales. The Mermaid of Zennor, the story I just told you. Sometimes our hero Matthew, turned into a merman, will ring the bells of the sunken churches of Lyonesse to warn his old townsfolk at Zennor that there is a storm coming. And sometimes fishermen, when they're sailing around beyond Land's End, can hear the bells tolling under the water. And sometimes they bring up bits of broken old door or window frame in their nets right up until the 18th century. Must have been very old doors then. So, the drowned land of Lyonesse. When was the Great Sinking? Was it in 1090? Or was it much earlier during King Arthur's reign? It would have to be if Tristan was alive at the time. Or was it much, much earlier during the sea level rises that sunk Doggerland? Or is it pure folklore? You decide. That's Land's End. There, look. The official Land's End with the signpost. And those beyond that container ship are the Scilly Isles. They're extremely silly. Here we are in Penzance, home of pirates of Penzance. London Inn. This isn't London, it's Penzance. There it is. This may have been £4.50, but it's got a mermaid on it. The Mermaid of Zennor. Let's see how she tastes. Imagine I'm Matthew. Oh, she tastes Gert Lush. Oh, she fucking does as well.
Let's have a bit.
Next it's this. Whistling up the wind. Cornish fishing. Yesterday it was unbelievably rainy. And today it's been a clear day. And you can see the moon, you can see the horizon, you can see giants striding across the land and all of that.
Can I hold it?
No, you're not. Behold, St. Michael's Mount, named after the Archangel Michael himself. So, the Cornish name, in the Cornish language for this mount, which I forget now, but I will put it on the screen there, means something like the rock in the forest, or the hill in the oak forest, or something like that. Because all of this used to be a great forest with a mount rising out of it. That in prehistoric times was there where ancient people got the tin, guarded by the tin giants of Cornwall. Look, you either get the boat at high tide, or low tide apparently, or when it's low tide, you can take the causeway. Is that nice, Brad? So St Michael's Mount is on a ley line called the St Michael's ley line, fittingly. A lot of that more or less follows the southwesterly direction of the Ridgeway, one of Britain's oldest road. Nero is not at all sure about all of these people. If it was still the days of Cormoran the Giant, all these people would be dead. Magical place here. No wonder the Neolithic peoples were drawn to it. No granite fortress of the giant Cormoran. Going to a World War II pillbox here. Absolutely stunning. So the St Michael's ley line, or the St Michael and Mary ley line, from here goes northeast, which is that way, and it goes through the Avebury landscape and follows the Ridgeway. But there's another St Michael's line, another St Michael's ley line, a more famous one, the Sword of St Michael, that goes southwest from here, that way. Ah, shit, I just spilled coffee on myself. Bloody archangels. Not southwest, sorry, southeast. The St Michael's line goes southeast from here, which is across the sea that way to France, all the way to the Holy Land. It goes through another St Michael's Mount in France, and the other way behind me it hits a St Michael's mound on the west coast of Ireland. It keeps going through various St Michael affiliated religious sites, ancient ones in Italy, all the way to the coast of Israel, Palestine. So that is a line associated with the Archangel Michael. That's why this story is associated with St Michael's Mount. Oh, I forgot this. There was a terrible storm this year. They didn't even take my token. Bloody National Trust. This stuff looks older, doesn't it? Old fortifications. God, look at those boulders up there. A long time after the Royalists were defeated. Oh, there's a cave in here. Maybe that's where the giant did a shit. Coat of arms here. Yeah, a bastion. So this is the story of the Archangel Michael and how he lent his name to this mount. One day, the devil himself, old Nick, decided he wanted a piece of Cornwall. But the thing is, the devil isn't very good at keeping a secret. So the devil told one of his imps, and the imp told a goblin, and the goblin told a succubus, and the succubus told her lover, who told his mother. And it went on and on and on. The whisperings reached all the way up to the celestial realms, the ears of the cherubim, seraphim, and the angels and the archangels, until this bit of gossip reached the ears of the Archangel Michael himself. Now, the Archangel Michael, or Michael, was not having any of this. He was very fond of Cornwall and its good people. So he descended in a flash of white fire, and he landed right there, right where that chapel is in front of me, just in the nick of time, because old Nick himself, Satan, was winging his way through the air across the sea from a southeasterly direction, following that ancient serpent line, that ley line across the earth. And Satan was coming in the form of a great worm, a great dragon, breathing fire from his nostrils. And in his talons, he was holding a great boulder, and he was going to destroy St. Michael's Mount with it, or maybe St. Ives, or possibly block up the entrance to hell. Accounts vary. But Michael was having none of this. So as soon as Michael landed, he took angelic form, a sword of flaming celestial fire in his hand, and he winged his way towards that dragon, Satan himself. Now, the dragon, Satan, was a little bit, he had his hands full, didn't he, with his big boulder, so his talons were taken up, but he breathed fire through his nostrils, but that was no match for St. Michael. He just swatted it away with a celestial swipe, and then cut off the dragon's head with one swoop of his celestial blade. That dragon dropped the rock, and it went sailing through the air and landed in a place called Helston in Cornwall. And it is still there today, except it's not, because someone's broken it up to help build part of the town. And that dragon resumed its true form, the winged form of the devil himself. And then the devil and St. Michael just did battle, wheeling together in the sky and down, and plopped into the sea just there, and it fizzed and bubbled. And the devil was not seen in Cornwall again for a very long time. And in honour of St. Michael, the people of this place built a chapel here on the rock. So here is the chapel of St. Michael. And here is St. Michael slaying Satan. So through this door here is a narrow set of stairs that goes up to the top, and up there is King Arthur's chair. It's a natural formation that this church tower is built into. This story is really interesting of St. Michael and the dragon, because it seems to be a relic or a version or an echo of that same old ancient Indo-European myth of a solar deity or a thunder deity or a weather deity of some kind slaying the cosmic serpent and thereby releasing the rains for fertility. George and the dragon, same thing. Thor and the world serpent, similar deal. It's one of our oldest stories, and many of the places along the St. Michael's line, both of them, the one that goes to the Holy Land and the one that goes through southwest England, many of the places along those two ley lines, let's call them, are associated with serpent-slaying myths. George and the dragon on Dragon Hill, that's on the St. Michael and Mary line. There's also, of course, the myth of Perseus slaying a sea monster on the coast of what is now Israel. This is, interestingly, the same myth. In fact, the George and the Dragon myth probably descended from that one, picked up by Crusaders during the Holy Wars in the Holy Land. St. Michael landed right here on this spot, and the dragon came from over there. Satan carrying a big rock. You would have seen him flying this way, breathing fire. And they did battle and fell into the sea right there. And the Archangel, Michael, descending in a shaft of light from the sky, landed right here where this post is behind me. So this marker here indicates where St. Michael, the Archangel, touched down, right here. You're a seagull. It's later in the afternoon now, less grockles. So all of these boulders here have been dropped by the giant Cormoran and his wife, sometimes in some versions. So for this one, that is supposedly his heart, which I imagine petrified after the giant Cormoran was slayed by Jack, the giant killer, folk hero of Cornwall. I will tell you his story shortly, because I've mentioned him enough times already. So, Giant's Well. That is where the giant Cormoran stored his human victims before he cooked and ate them. There's another boulder. Very, very messy builders, giants. And the harbour. So, in the Bronze Age, the mount here behind me, much like it is today, would have been an island in a shallow sea. So the oak forests would have long ago disappeared in the sea level rise that drowned Doggerland and also drowned the mythical lands of Lyonesse off the coast of Land's End. It's amazing that the name, a rock in an oak forest, was retained in the Cornish language for all that time. Incredible, really. Or maybe it's because of the remains of fossilized trees. Who knows? Could be both. Those sailors, those Bronze Age sailors, a whole network of trade routes going from the Eastern Mediterranean, the great empires of the Hittites and the Assyrians, the ancient Egyptians, the Minoans, all of those ancient classical Bronze Age civilizations. Their sailors linked up with other sailors, came all the way to Cornwall for tin, which they mined from that rock behind me, or rather local tin miners would have done it. These local tin miners must have been rather larger than the Near Eastern visitors, if any of them made it this far. We don't know if they did. It could have been other, more local ones. But anyway, rumours gradually spread all the way along those trade networks back to the Eastern Med that the land of Britain was populated by giants, tin giants. That's why in so many old mythologies, not just Cornish, from all over Britain, Britain is said in history to be populated by giants. The founder of Britain, Brutus, allegedly started clearing the giants. His champion, a wrestler, Corineus, flung the giant Gogmagog into the sea and was given Cornwall as a prize by Brutus. That's why Cornwall is called Cornwall, after Corineus, that mythical wrestler. The last giants were said to be killed in the days of King Arthur, many of them by King Arthur and his knights himself. Got a video on that. Some say the very last of the giants were killed by a Cornishman, a Cornish folk hero called Jack the Giant Killer. And in those days, a giant lived on St. Michael's Mount. And this giant's name was Cormoran. And he was huge. He was 20 feet tall at least. And when he was hungry, he would wade over the shallow sea from his caves on St. Michael's Mount, where he kept much treasure, and he would wade over the sea, and he would terrorise the farms, and people would go running about him, and he would scoop the people up, and he would bite off their heads and go, oh, I don't like that one very much, chuck it over his shoulder, and he would scoop up all the livestock. He would get all the sheep and cattle, and he would tie them all to his belt like that, so they were hanging there like that. He would tear the roofs of houses and help himself to all the ale, and if there was a little child there, he would seize that and wipe his bum with it and throw it away. He was terrorising all of Cornwall, and the people were terrified. One day Jack, who lived alone with his mother, of course, one day Jack was walking through the Cornish town of St Ives, capital of Cornwall, or was then. And he was walking through St Ives, and he walked past the town hall, and he could hear all the magistrates were having a meeting. They were discussing what they would do about this giant cormoran. They didn't know what to do, and they were getting into a big heated discussion about what to do. And then Jack bursts in through the door and says, I'm looking for adventure. I will slay the giant cormoran. What will you give me if I do so? And one of the magistrates says, well, all of the giant's treasure, of course, but you'll have to give 10% to the city council. Deal! And Jack goes off to St Michael's Mount. He goes at dawn, the sun rising behind him. Now Jack takes a pickaxe. This is mining territory, Cornwall, tin mining territory, that's important. Jack takes a pickaxe and a shovel and a horn, a hunting horn. That's all he needs. And Jack goes, and in the sand of the beach, looking at St Michael's Mount there, just across the shallow sea, he digs a big old hole, huge hole. And he covers it with planks and sticks. You've all seen this in cartoons. Covers it with sticks, and then he covers that over with seaweed, and then covers that over with sand, so you can't see it on the beach. Then he gets out his horn, and this is dawn, remember, and he blows his horn. He blows his horn to wake up the giant cormoran. And the giant slumbers and awakes. And he screams and shouts, and Cormoran is very angry. And he says, fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of a Cornishman. And Jack is there tootling on his hunting horn. And he says, come and get me, you big, stupid, ugly giant. You smell of old cheese. And the giant goes, and he can see the silhouette of a arrogant young boy there, and he charges with his club, but he's blinded by the sun, and he falls right into the pit. And before he has a chance to climb out again, Jack, with his pickaxe, raises it above his head and drives it straight through the giant's skull. Bing! So he kills that giant, dispatches that giant very easily, and then goes to the giant's cave on St Michael's Mount and gathers all the treasure and takes it back to the magistrates, and he is dubbed Jack the Giant Killer. And his fame spreads far and wide. It even reaches the ears of King Arthur, because this is sort of, straddling different time periods, this story. And King Arthur's very pleased, and Jack goes on to kill very many more giants. Some of them have 2 heads, some of them have 3 heads. Quite a lot of them are Welsh. It's low tide now, been in there a couple of hours, and the causeway is now visible. The giant cormoran. When he was a younger giant, he had a wife before the days of Jack and the Giant Killer. But he wasn't very nice to his wife, sometimes called Cormelia. Don't know why. And he would force his wife to carry great granite blocks in her apron to build his fortress, his house, on St Michael's Mount. But she would always drop the granite boulders out of her, maybe tears in her apron, and they would land at various strange places in Cornwall. And they are, some say, the granite tors and boulders that we see scattered across the moors and beaches and headlands of Cornwall. One day, Cormoran the giant got so cross with his wife that he gave her a kick. He wasn't very nice. And all of the blocks dropped out of her apron, and they landed right by the causeway on the way over to St Michael's Mount. You can still see it today. It's where people are picked up by the boats to take the boat journey over to St Michael's Mount. So, geology be damned, all the granite tors of Cornwall fell from Cormoran the Giant's wife's apron. Look, it's low tide now. Been in there a couple of hours, and the causeway is now visible. This is Gwynfor Beach. Gwyn means white in Cornish, just like in Welsh. So White Sands Beach, because it's a nice white sand beach. And this place features in folklore, Cornish folklore. This is the very beach where you can sometimes hear the shriek of Jan Tegeagle, cursed spirit of a wicked man who was forced by demons and goblins to make ropes out of sand here, lest he be dragged, kicking and screaming, down to hell. There's a Cornish phrase I'd like to introduce you to roar like Tegeagle, to bellow like Tegeagle. Who's Tegeagle? Jan Tegeagle is a figure from folklore and history. So to roar like Tegeagle means to give an anguished, angry roar of frustration. The kind of roar you can sometimes hear on a windy night in West Cornwall. It's attributed to the ghost of a man called Jan Tegeagle, a very, very wicked man who did exist in history. Now, the folklore says he butchered his wife and children, perhaps many wives and many children, and hid their bones beneath the floor of his house. I can't say whether that's true or not, but the historical Jan Tegeagle was in fact a manager for a lord's estate, and it was his job to collect the rent. Now, he was a very sly character, this Tegeagle, and he would often collect the money from the various tenant farmers on this lord's estate, but he wouldn't put it in the ledger. And when it was brought up, he would deny all knowledge of it because he had pocketed the money himself. Very, very, very wicked, and he would be all too happy to see that tenant turfed out of that house, or even sent to the workhouse. This is about 300 years ago. Now, when Jan Tegeagle died, no one really grieved. No one came to his funeral. Everyone grieved. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief because he was a fairly unpleasant character. But shortly after his death, there was a bit of a problem. The lord of the estate found that some of his books were not in order, and one of his tenants had missed a whole year's rent, a large sum of money. And he was summoned up and made to, testify in court. And he said, I swear I've paid the money. I paid it to Jan Tegeagle. He must have pocketed it. But the magistrates would have none of it. So he swore on the Bible, this tenant farmer, and said, may Jan Tegeagle himself be summoned here to testify. And there was a dark thunderclap. And in the courtroom, there was a smell of sulphur and black smoke, and Jan Tegeagle appeared in the witness box, or his ghost did, looking a bit singed, because of course he had been in the fires of hell, because he was very wicked. And Jan Tegeagle testified and said, yes, indeed, this farmer has paid his whole year's rent. I just pocketed the money and didn't put it in the ledger. And the case was closed, and the judge said to the ghost of Jan Tegeagle, very good, you may now leave. And Jan said, I ain't going nowhere. I'm not going back to the fires of hell. Well, that left a bit of a problem, because there was now a ghost of a very unpleasant man haunting the courtroom in Bodmin, let's say. Luckily, there was a local holy man that lived nearby, and he was summoned and tried to exorcise the ghost of Jan Tegeagle, but it didn't work. He would not go back to hell to face torment. So they reached an uneasy arrangement. Jan would do a series of useless tasks, and so long as he performed the useless tasks, he wouldn't go back to hell, but he wouldn't be bothering the living either. Now, the first useless task was this. He had to empty the Dosmary Pool, which is an ancient lake on Bodmin Moor that will feature again in this video. He had to empty that magic lake, and all he had to do it with was a limpet shell. Some versions say a cockle shell. But in all versions, there is a hole in the shell, so he can't actually empty the lake, and he'll keep going forever, and he would roar with frustration on occasion, and you can still hear the roar echoing over Bodmin Moor. But the devil was a bit miffed because he had been cheated of a soul that was rightfully his. So he sent his imps and his goblins and his hellhounds up to Bodmin Moor to try and distract Jan Tegeagle. And one of the goblins just knocked the limpet shell out of his hand, and then he was no longer employed in a task, so he could be summoned back to hell, and the hellhounds chased him, and Jan Tegeagle ran all the way over the moor. Sometimes you can still see his ghost fleeing over the moors, and the hellhounds with their red eyes following him. But they are not the beast of Bodmin Moor, because we'll get to that story in a moment. Jan ran all the way back to that holy man in his hermitage on Bodmin Moor and implored him. So the holy man gave him another task. Jan was to make ropes of sands on Gwynfor Beach. And as you all know, it's impossible to make ropes out of sand. So Jan Tegeagle remains here to this day, forever weaving ropes out of sand, and each night the tide will come and wash them away. Tide's out now, so I wonder where he is. Can't see any ropes of sand, but I guess it's spirit sand. And legend has it, Jan Tegeagle is still on that very beach, making ropes of sand every night, and every evening when the tide washes it away, he bellows, hence the phrase, to roar like Tegeagle. So don't be like Jan. Don't be a dick.
Yeah, no, well, whatever you buy.
Here we are in the delightful town of St Just, not far from Land's End in Cornwall, and here is a story associated with this place. It's called The Death Ship. About 300 years ago, a man, a stranger, rented a room above an inn in St Just Square, just behind me. Maybe it was that one. No one knew where he had come from, and he was very quiet, wore a long black sea coat and just one eye that rolled around in his head, swarthy complexion, dark hair. It was said that he was a pirate that had been abandoned by his shipmates for weapons. Now, shortly after this strange dark man rented a room in St Just, many shipwrecks started to havoc the coast just here. This man, he had a horse, and he tied a lantern around the neck of that horse, but hobbled it by tying its head to one of its front legs, and he would drive it along the cliffs here, just outside the town. And ships passing around the headland at night would think they had plenty of sea room because they thought that bobbing light would be another ship. Not so. Those ships would be wrecked on the rocks, and then that man would creep up over the slippery rocks at night with a boarding axe, and as the sailors tried to pull themselves to safety, would lop off their hands, or maybe would give them a bash on the head, and he would push them into the sea, and then he would be able to gather all the loot, goodness and provisions that had washed up on the rocky shore. And this went on for a very, very long time, and he was known as the Wrecker. Eventually, his final day drew near, and he was in his room above the inn there, and even though it was a sunny day outside, it was all full of darkness and dark cloud inside his room, and he could see the sailors and the demons coming to get him. They were pouring out of the ceiling. Some of them had no hands, trying to drag him away on the death ship. The priest was summoned, and sure enough, the devil was scuttling like a spider upside down on the room. And the priest tried to exorcise the devil, flinging holy water, saying the Lord's Prayer, but to no avail. The devil turned into the form of a fly, a blue bottle, and just buzzed around, evading the priest's prayers, and eventually settling on the dying man's forehead as he saw all the sailors pouring down from the sea above him to take his soul. And eventually the devil, in the form of a fly, went into his mouth, and the man drew his last breath. At this very moment, on the fields outside St. Just, there were two harvesters working with their scythes, and even though it was a bright sunny day, suddenly a black cloud came over, and they heard a dark voice say, "The hour has come, but the man has not yet come." And as soon as they heard that strange gravelly voice, a black ship sailed round the headland with black sails, square rigged, and it sailed straight towards the headland without slowing down, and up the beach and straight through the cornfield that they were working in. They had to leap out the way, and they could see that there was not a single soul on board deck, and that death ship was sailing over the cornfield in the direction of St. Just. And some witnesses said that it sailed right up the high street here, and then black clouds came from the deck through the window of the inn where the man was lodging, claimed him, and then sailed away. The townspeople of St. Just wanted to get rid of this corpse as quickly as possible, so a coffin was quickly knocked together, and as it was being carried into this churchyard just next door, a black pig came out of nowhere and was following the pallbearers. And then the men scarpered, and when they came back, a bolt of lightning had struck the coffin and nothing remained. But they did report when they were carrying it that it was so light that there could not have been a body inside. So that is the story of the Wrecker and the death ship. Those rusty nails will be somewhere in this very churchyard. Seems speaking that story in this churchyard has invoked something, because dark clouds are coming overhead. Babe, nice knockers. No, in there, knockers, nice knockers. There are a few creatures of folklore that are unique to Cornwall. Small, diminutive creatures you don't often see, similar to elves and pixies and goblins in other parts of Britain. But Cornish ones are a bit different. They are knockers, spriggans, and piskies. So Cornish choughs that you can see nesting here down in the Cop Valley. They're a type of corvid, one of Britain's native corvids, and probably the rarest corvid we have. You only get them at the far west of Cornwall and the far west of South Pembrokeshire in Wales. Interestingly, two places that are strongly associated with the legend of King Arthur. So in the Cornish tradition, not the Welsh, but the Cornish, King Arthur, after the last battle at Camlan, wherever that took place, but after the last battle, King Arthur, mortally wounded, was going to die. But he didn't die. He, in fact, changed form into a Cornish chough, this species of corvid. And he is still in that form today. If ever you see a Cornish chough with its red beak and its little red legs and its call, that is in fact the spirit of the once and future king. So you should always, my friends, doff your cap and say, "How to do, sire, your majesty?" And there are many little folk tales, which I will not tell now, but many little folk tales of a chough, King Arthur in the form of a chough, communicating with piskies and knockers and all sorts of invisible entity. And he's just waiting for the time when he will regain human form again to save the island of Britain from peril. In Welsh tradition, he's normally buried in a cave somewhere, like this video here. But in the Cornish tradition, he's in chough form. Look at those rock formations down there. Incredible. Along this stretch of coastline from Cot Valley, there's the coast path there. And there's one little square patch to put a tent, and it is, alas, being taken. So we will instead journey around the coast a little bit to try and find a place to sleep at Cape Cornwall.
Camping in luxury.
It is winter solstice. I mean, my wife's laughing at me on our first wedding anniversary. It's summer solstice today, the longest day of the year, and the sun is just about to set over there. So we are just above the Cot Valley, just outside St Just, right at the end of the land in Cornwall. And there are a lot of abandoned tin mines, or all kinds of mines here. Obviously mining very important for the Cornish industry. And there are some particular creatures of folklore associated with the tin mines, such as knockers. Knockers. Knockers are probably the most unusual of knockens, spriggans and piskies. They are exclusive to Cornwall and almost entirely associated with old mine shafts, like this one behind me and this one in front of me. Old tin mining mines. They're associated with holes in the ground, either caves, open mines, or mine shafts. Now, in terms of their appearance, they are just like little miners. They're about knee-high, and they have picks and shovels and lump hammers. They're quite ugly and deformed. They have thin necks and very oversized noses, spindly little fingers, and they kind of squeak and cackle at you, and they knock. They knock. It is perhaps the source of strange noises that miners hear underground, and they will hide your tools, or they will sing little songs. In the folklore, what you're supposed to do as a miner to keep the knockers on side is to leave them a little bit of your meal. That's similar for many small supernatural entities in other parts of the world as well. So maybe a little bit of your Cornish pasty that you've taken down the mine, leave a little bit for the knockers. If you don't, they'll come after you. They're also sometimes responsible for hiding your tools or if things go missing. There were quite a few knockers about last night because I kept losing things where we were camped at the top of the hill. The place where we were camped, just beyond Land's End, is the place where the oldest mines in Cornwall are, going right back to the Bronze Age, right back to the Neolithic. So very fitting that they're associated with underground entities, and there's all the mine shafts around there. We were trying to sleep last night and we went to bed in calm. We were trying to cook and things kept going missing. I lost my lighter about 12 times, lost my fork, lost a wooden spoon, lost everything. Everything went missing, tent pegs. And in the night, it was calm, but then this huge wind came in out of nowhere and our tent was flapping. And I swear I could hear cackling laughter at night. So perhaps it was the knockers. There is a story about knockers associated with that very place, which I'll tell you in a minute. It's sunset on the longest day of the year. This is a very early Bronze Age barrow burial mound. Although I think one of the graves in here is actually late Neolithic, which is interesting, showing a continuation of practice from the Neolithic into the Bronze Age. Really respectable place to place the dead, right at the end of the land here. You wonder what mythology lay behind that decision. Were the dead perhaps journeying to the land beneath the sea, following the setting sun? Two concentric rings around the central cyst or grave, and then other little graves around it, little cysts. It almost seems like a piece of solar symbology, doesn't it? Possible to know now, I suppose, because some Victorian antiquarian dug a big hole through it. What do you guys think? Solar symbol? Cannon to shoot the ancestors over the sea? I'm cutting up a sausage, a chorizo sausage. Can I get no Cornish knockers to nick our tomatoes? Tomatoes!
Anniversary.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Happy anniversary. So here is a story about knockers. It's about a miner called Tom who came to St. Just looking for work, and he found work at Ballowall mine. Now Tom, he wasn't a very superstitious person. Bit of a theme in a lot of these stories. So Tom, with his eldest son, he went down the mine and he did his work. And before he started working, before long, he could hear the songs of the knockers. It's like they were working it's like they were digging mines just the other side of the mine face, of the rock face. And Tom was looking for the rich seams of tin or lead or anything else. And all the time he could hear the singing. And every time he took a swing with his pick or his lump hammer and missed or did something badly, he could hear the knockers giggle and go, He was clearly aware that they could see him, but Tom couldn't see them. And he just dropped a whole load of ore on his foot and cursed, and the knockers had laughed at him, and then he lost his temper and said, "Pipe down, you horrid spirits!" And he grabbed a few rocks and lobbed them down the mine shaft, and they went ka-dung, 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 and suddenly the cackling just ceased. Now, it was mid-shift, and Tom had a bit of peace and quiet, and he ate his lunch, him and his boy. And then he was just feeling a little bit sleepy after lunch, and he heard a voice in his ear saying, "Spare a little crumb for Bucker, spare a little crumb for the knockers, or you shall have bad luck tomorrow." And Tom woke up, and, he had heard what he heard, but he decided to eat the very last morsel of his Cornish pasty anyway. Well, Tom went up the mine shaft and he went to the local pub in St. Just, and he told everyone about his experience, and all the other miners and locals said, "Tom, you fool, that's not how you deal with knockers. You'll get bad luck tomorrow." And Tom said, "Nonsense." And he went down the mine shaft anyway the next day, and he had to do a bit of mending of some, struts in the mine to make it safe, and he collected all his ore, and then in the middle of the day he ate his food again, didn't leave a crumb for the knockers, and he had a snooze. And when he woke up, he saw the knockers. He saw them. You don't usually see them. And they were snoozing too, just in the gloomy light by his little candle. He could just see them, and his candle was just about to go out, and they woke up. And they looked at him and started putting all sorts of strange, hideous faces. And thumbing their noses at him and going, and then they disappeared into the wall face, into the seam of tin. In fact, they had just become seams of ore. Well, Tom got a bit of a fright having seen the knockers, so he decided to pack up his tools, pack up his ore, and he had to just kind of finish repairing one of the mine shafts so he could get up, and then he could hear the knockers, him and his son, mining underneath him, and then the whole shaft gave way, and Tom just managed to leap to safety, but he lost all his ore, he lost all his tools, all his livelihood down that shaft, and he and his son managed to crawl up to safety and told everyone in the pub about his story, and oh, how they all laughed and said he had had a close run with the knockers. Well, my friends, I do wonder if the knockers paid us a visit last night, because that wind on our tent was heaving, and I swear to you, my friends, I could hear laughter in the howling of the wind. I did, before we left, give a little morsel of food into an open mine shaft that we were camping nearby. This description that you often hear as well of knockers having grotesque faces and pulling faces and trying to kind of freak you out with their silly faces reminds me so much of goblin behaviour. I've seen goblins in altered states do exactly this. If you want to see a video about goblins, I'll put a link in the description and just here. So now I'll take you back to Ballawall and our strange camp for the evening. So we are now on the Tinner's Way. Presumably the route the tin miners would have taken to the great tin mine up on the horizon above me, which I think features in Poldark. There's Tam wearing her new hat. Always support the local economy, even when they don't really want you here. There's the mine up on the hill, look. Hi-ho, hi-ho, it's off to work I go. Bet that place is infested with knockers and piskies and spriggans and all manner of subterranean goblin. I know this is a bit of a stereotype, but we've had some very changeable weather. very changeable weather in Cornwall. It's almost as if it's a narrow peninsula surrounded by two seas, jutting into the North Atlantic, pissing down with rain this morning, then baking with sunshine, then wind, and then hail, and then sunshine again. See what happens later. One thing I really like about different parts of this island is the way local materials are often employed for buildings and farm infrastructure. So here, so many granite slabs, many of which might have been part of sort of Neolithic structures forming farm gateposts just all over the place. Makes all the farmland seem quite sort of ominous and important. So this is Menantol, a megalithic site, a burial chamber. Menantol in the Cornish language means the stone with the hole in it. Here it is. So in folklore and also West Country folk magic, a stone with a natural hole in it, not necessarily this big, is called a hagstone. So these are very important in folk magic and superstition. They're normally protective. You wear one around your neck on a piece of string and it'll protect you from witches, hags, bad magic, and also supernatural entities that might do you harm, like Spriggans and knockers and piskies and those kind of things. They also have curative properties. So for hundreds of years, this stone, babies and children were passed through it 9 times, and that was said to cure them of rickets, leprosy, the cold, whooping cough, you name it. There's one other function of a hagstone in folklore. You peer through it, and it's a window into the other world. A friend of mine, Jamie, a filmmaker, made a film about that. It's called Hagstone. I'll put a link to it if you want to see it. But that's very interesting because Neolithic people, the builders of this monument, may have had a similar idea. We don't know what their worldview and mythology was, but we think perhaps this was an entrance to a burial chamber. If so, it is unique in Britain. Burial chambers where I'm from in Wiltshire tend to have doorways of 2 uprights and a lintel making a door into the long barrow. Alternatively, it may have been freestanding, and we figured out from archaeoastronomy that peering through the hole at certain stations, certain times of year, certain phases of the moon reveal a full moon over certain burial chambers in the horizon, exactly framed by the centre of this stone. That is a piece of Neolithic magic, if ever I've seen one. It's also really fascinating that these mounds, usually associated with the dead, is so close to tin mines right here, also home to spirits of all sorts of entities, like knockers and Spriggans, often said to be the ghosts of dead miners, farmers, Cornishmen, ancestors, what have you. When this monument was first excavated, the stones weren't quite in alignment, suggesting that maybe 1 or 2 of them had already been moved in history. But you can see the shape of the barrow, more or less. It presumably would have been little chambers or rooms holding the bones of the dead. And this entranceway going through is a sort of liminal portal going to the realm of the ancestors. Spriggans, or Spriggans, if you like, slightly more contemporary pronunciation. They are fairly unique to Cornwall. They are horrid little goblins. They are distinct from knockers and distinct from piskies, but they do sometimes hang out with them. And whereas the other two can be nice, or at least ambivalent, depending on how you treat them, Spriggans are horrid beings. They are malevolent entities. Now, they often inhabit some of the same places as knockers and piskies, certainly mine shafts and caves and wild, desolate places, but also burial chambers and burial mounds. where there is treasure buried, and Spriggans are normally placed as guardians of treasure. That's sort of their function. Their appearance is ugly. They're a bit like bad djinn or bad elves or bad fairies. They can cause crop blight, they can cause storms, they can cause illness in cattle, just like bad fairies or bad witches. Similar kind of thing, but also this function of guarding treasure. So if you encounter misfortune somewhere near a burial mound or somewhere where there might be hidden treasure from long, long ago, it could be a Spriggan, an invisible Spriggan doing mischief to you. It's interesting, at the stone with the hole in it, when I went through the hole in the stone 9 times, as is said to bring good luck in the folklore, as soon as I'd done that, suddenly the rain clouds descended on us. So I don't know whether that was a good or a bad sign. In retrospect, maybe that was misguided of me, because the instant I went 9 times through that stone, the sky darkened and it started to rain again. It's like activating the landscape with stories. That is a thing, in my experience. Like someone's left a lovely offering here. I love that these places are still being venerated and are still active. Next, we're going there. Foxgloves are interesting in the folklore, particularly when we're talking about knockers and spriggans and piskies and other entities that may not always wish you well, that may sometimes play mischief on you. It's said that if you tuck foxgloves into your hat or wear them around your neck, you'll have protection from the bad kind of fairy-like being, elf-type being. So I wonder if any of the miners wore these when they descended down this mine shaft right in front of us for protection from the knockers. There's different opinions as to where knockers come from. Some say that they are descended from Jews that condemned Christ. Probably a bit of an anti-Semitic early medieval gloss there. Another idea is that knockers are the souls of dead miners or people that have lost their lives in the mine shafts. Must have been a very dangerous job. Even in the modern period, my granddad was a coal miner and he knew many people that lost their lives in the mines. Although where he's from in Yorkshire, no ideas about knockers. He used to tell me all sorts of stories from the pit. No little entities living down there in the mines. This is my granddad's actual pickaxe that he used on the coalface in Yorkshire during the Second World War. He was a great storyteller, my granddad. Maybe it was all the time he spent underground where stories live. Often the miners in Cornwall, the tin miners, would have all sorts of stories of things going missing, and also the sound of the knockers, either knocking or singing their songs or mining underground, their little tunnels. Another idea is that knockers perhaps are spirits of the underworld. They are a bit like gnomes, if you think about them, guarding the treasure that is underground. Another idea is that they are a whole different supernatural race of beings. Just like elves or fairies or goblins, they have their own kingdoms, their own dominions, and the knockers are just the mining division of that supernatural race of beings. Weather's cleared now. That'll be the Spriggans. sexual. Little fairy glen. Uh-oh, more mine shafts. Look, that could have been Tom from our tale of the knocker tumbling down the mine shaft. Our story of Tom and the knockers, which I told you earlier, does have an ending. Tom gave up mining in the end after his experience, took up farming instead, but his bad luck followed him. He'd always mislay his scythe or always have bad luck with crop yields until his wife visited a peller, a cunning woman, and she rid Tom of the knocker's curse, and he had good luck after that. That is an extremely good pasty. Traditionally, the crimped bit on the edge is so miners, like Tom, could hold the pasty and not get their meal grubby. Although, clearly, Tom liked the crust because he didn't leave any for the knockers. There you go. Crust holder. And something for Nero. So all these mine shafts that are apparently still open in places like this reminds me that these stories of knockers, maybe a lot of them might have come from or been influenced by actual voices and sounds of humans working underground that are heard by the people on the surface. Maybe not all of them, but some. A bit like this story, well-known Cornish folktale of a man called Barker. Barker. He was a lazy farmhand and he never liked to do any work at all. And sometimes when all the other labourers were working, he would come to a place like this and just lie down under a mossy tree. And he also didn't believe about any of that superstitious mumbo-jumbo. Ironic then that one day when he was having a little sleep under a tree just like this one, he heard the voices of the knockers getting closer and closer under the ground beneath him in one of the mine shafts. He could hear their little picks, hear their knocking, and then they went quiet. It was getting dark and they were discussing where to hide their tools for the night. One said, I'll put it in this little fern here. Another said, I'll put it in the cleft of this tree. And the third one says, I'll put my pick on Barker's knee. And Barker, at that moment, felt this huge invisible weight on his knee. And he was never the same afterwards. He always had a limp. He could never really get good farm work after that, even if he wanted it. So there's a Cornish phrase, someone's got Barker's knee, if they don't really want to get their ass in gear and do any work. Little Cornish folktale about the knockers there. Any knockers in there, mate? It's a very old boundary stone here. Probably dropped by a giant. There's a local custom in this part of Cornwall. It's called the furry dance. It is possibly a remnant of a pagan, pre-Christian fertility rite for springtime and for beneficial harvest and fertile men and women folk and animals and all the rest. Although this monument behind me is only from a few hundred years old, there is still a tradition where two elderly widows with white hair and 10 young maidens, virgins in white dresses, are led by a fiddler round and around and around that monument. It just feels like it's an echo of a pagan custom. Replace the monument with a standing granite stone or something like that, or a tor or burial mound. So the furry dance there, is it a remnant of a pre-Christian fertility rite, or is it a modern thing? Behind me is Polzeth Beach, one of North Cornwall's more popular tourist destinations for surfers. You can just make out the bay. Beyond that, it's an estuary. It's the mouth of the river Camel. In there is the town of Rock and the town of Padstow. Padstow is famous for a story about a mermaid, another mermaid legend. In the year 1610, a visitor to Cornwall noted that this harbour here, just outside Padstow, was the best in the whole of North Cornwall for ships. It had a nice deep bay going into it. The Camel estuary there could hold all kinds of vessel, until a great storm. Now there's a story about that storm. About 300 years ago, there was a local man from Padstow. He has a name. It was Tristram Bird. Now, Tristram was not very popular. He didn't have very many friends. He wasn't very popular with the ladies. He was a bit of a show-off. He tried a bit too hard. I'm sure we all know someone like that. Now, one day, Tristram bought himself a nice, shiny gun. He thought that would impress the ladies. And he would always say, I'm off to shoot this or that. I'm going to shoot a seagull. I'm going to shoot a fish. And people would go, yeah, go on, Tristram, go on. And they didn't have much time for him. Now, one day, Tristram was walking along the rocky cove. Some say he was at Hawker's Cove over there. Some say he was on this spot right here, just outside Polzeth. Now Tristram saw on the rocks beneath him the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. He could see her back. She was so shapely. She was sat on that rock right there, and she was gazing into a looking glass and combing her hair. And Tom could see her reflection in the mirror of that pool right there, and she was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. And Tom said, I think I'm in love with you. And the mermaid, for a mermaid she was, turned around and said, you've never met me. And Tom said, come away home to my house. I have fine linen, I have lovely china crockery. And the mermaid said, if your linen was all silk and your crockery was all silver, I would not come away with you. And Tom, still trying his best, said, I could have any girl in Polzeth, any girl in Newquay, any girl in Padstow. And the mermaid said, why don't you go and marry one of them then? And she was just about to make her way off the rock when Tom said, if I can't have you, no one will. I will shoot you. And the mermaid said to Tom, if you shoot me, Tom, I will put a curse on you and on all the people of Polzeth and Padstow forevermore. For centuries I have guided the ships into the bay. And Tom said, I don't care. And he raised his gun and shot the mermaid. But she survived. And as she swam off that rock there, she surfaced and raised a fist in curse on Tom, on Tristram, I've changed his name, and on all the people of Padstow. And that very night there was a great storm that raged for 1, 2, 3 days. It's in the annals, it's in the history. And when the storm had passed, there was a sandbar across the mouth of the harbour. It's still there to this day. It's called the Doom Bar, and it has wrecked many a ship. It also lends its name to a popular pint of amber ale brewed in rock just over that headland called Doom Bar. And as for Tristram, or Tom as I keep calling him, he never had a good day luck in all his life. He went to Padstow to his local pub and confessed that he had shot a mermaid. He said he confused her for a seal. Why are you even shooting seals, they said. And Tom, or Tristram, was driven out of town, and he never had a good day's luck in his life, and lost his life at sea in the end. So, that is the story of the mermaid's curse. Never go messing with mermaids. Some local tradition puts the mermaid sitting right there, with Tristram on this rock here with his weird shoes. Other traditions put the mermaid in Hawker's Cove, which is just round that bay there. Padstow is beyond there. And there's a pool in Hawker's Cove called the Mermaid's Glass. I don't think that's called the Mermaid's Glass. It's not very still. Oops. Nearly. So, seeing as I kept calling Tristram Bird from the Mermaid of Padstow legend Tom, I thought I'd tell you another story about a Tom. It's not a piece of folklore, it's a piece of modern folklore, if you wish, about underage drinking and police brutality. It's about my brother called Tom, and it happened right here in this very bar in Cornwall, or actually just over there. So this happened when I was about 13, 14, and my brother, who's 12 years older than me, had taken me and a friend on a trip down to Cornwall. So we were underage, so we were drinking tins of beer in the street, and we were sat right there. We didn't come in the pub because we couldn't be served. Now, there are signs all along here that say no drinking alcohol in the street. But it didn't really seem to be being enforced. People were drinking in the street and smoking and that kind of thing, and generally having a good time in the street out here. My brother was drinking a tin of Stella, I think I was as well. I think I'd finished mine at this point, and the police came up, or a couple of police officers, man and a woman. And these police officers wandered up to my brother, who was drinking his can of Stella, and said, "There's no drinking in the street here." And Tom said, "Really?" And they said, "Yeah, can't you see that sign right there?" And he said, "No, I didn't see it." And Tom said, "Well, I've nearly finished." And the police officer said, "No, you're not," and went to grab the can. And Tom, at this moment, being very cheeky, squeezed the can, and the Stella shooted out all over the police officer's stab vest and his nice ironed white shirt. And then the policeman uttered these immortal words, which a policeman should never say. He said, "Right, you're nicked, Sonny," and tried to arrest my brother, who resisted. And the police officer said, "Don't resist," and tried to put him in a headlock, which apparently you're not supposed to do as a police officer. There was a whole audience lined up here where I'm now sat watching the spectacle, and then Tom, who had his head in a headlock at this moment, said, "Right, you're going over the cliff, matey," and did a kind of judo throw and lobbed him over those bushes, and the police officer went bang, 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 bang on the rocks. He wasn't seriously hurt, but he was rather bruised. At this very moment, a police van screeched up, and all doors opened, and 3 more officers charged out the back going, "Hut, hut, 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 hut." They might not have been going hut, 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 but, you know, it makes the story better. And Tom legged it in that direction to a cheer of the crowd here, and he ran all the way down the road with the, robot policeman going after him. And then, thinking he had some distance, he slid on his belly under a van that was parked up there, tearing his chin open, sliding meters onto the van. Unfortunately, the police officers were only a few meters behind him, so they just grabbed his ankles and hauled him out, gave him a good beating, pepper sprayed him in the face. I was behind him at this moment, and I got pepper spray in my face as well, which was a bit annoying, because I didn't really have anything to do with it. And they bundled him in the back of the police van and drove him away. He got off, he got away with it, because the police officers not only had pepper sprayed a 13-year-old boy, but the police officer put him in a headlock, which you're not allowed to do. So my brother actually got away scot-free with this one, or that time, thanks to a little statement of mine. And when I gave the statement in the police station back in Swindon, near where I live, and I got to the bit about the Cornish police officer saying, "Right, you're nicked, Sonny," both police officers I was giving the statement to just put their head in their hands like this. So that's my story of underage drinking and police brutality in Cornwall. Yum. Bit of Cornish yarg. I like yarg. This is the world-famous Jamaica Inn from the Daphne du Maurier novel of the same name. This is a smuggler's pub right in the middle of Bodmin Moor. So the builder of this inn had links, trading links with Jamaica. He was a mariner. It was a very popular profession for retired sailors to become landlords. So we built this stable and coaching house and inn as a traveller's rest who were making their way over Bodmin Moor, but it became a haven for smugglers. Smugglers sharing a dram. So Cornwall is very famous for its smugglers. The whole south coast of Cornwall, with its rocky little coves, would harbour all kinds of illegal contraband. Port from Portugal, brandy from just over the water in France, or gin from Holland, or, in the age of pirates, rum from Jamaica. So this inn is filled with ghost stories. Maybe many of them would have been spread by the smugglers themselves that wanted to put off locals from maybe looking too closely at any of their hiding places for kegs of rum out on the moor. But there is some substance to some of these ghost stories. There is a ghost of an old pirate called Jack, obviously, who haunts the corridor upstairs between rooms 5 and 7. Let's see if we can see a ghost. Rooms 3 to 12. Uh-oh, here it is. Oh yeah. No ghosts today. Just a bloke doing the beds. More recent folklore too has attached itself to the moor around this inn. The famous beast of Bodmin Moor. A piece of modern folklore. The beast of Bodmin Moor. Now, my friends, you can probably tell by this ridiculous shirt and by the fact that my face is quite red that it's an extremely hot day today. But when the mists roll in over Bodmin Moor, things get a little bit spooky. It becomes very dangerous to drive and you can't really see very far ahead and shadows move in the bushes. So the beast of Bodmin Moor is a legend and a very recent one. It is only from the 1980s, 1990s, that kind of time. And it's one of many big cat sightings up and down Britain. The very first incident, or the very first recorded incident, was an attack on a human. It was a dog walker, a young woman. She was about 37 years old. She was 37 years old, which is exactly the age of my wife. And she was walking her dog. Don't know how old the dog was. And she was walking along a stretch of Bodmin Moor, not far from where I'm sat right now. And she was walking along and suddenly she was thumped from behind and knocked off her feet. Really great, with great force. And she sort of rolled on the floor and she may have bumped her head maybe on a granite stone like this because she temporarily lost consciousness. And when she came to, her dog was sort of sat on her and she was lying on her back and her dog was sat on her growling. And she sat up and there, literally where that bush is there, maybe about 10 meters away, was a huge black cat crouched. And she looked at its tail, which was quite a fat, fluffy tail, and it was curled over like that. And she reckoned its tail was about 4 to 5 feet long. So that gives you a sense of the size of this beast, this black cat. Well, she got to her feet and the thing scarpered, but she got a really close view of it. Well, the local press got hold of the story. The Beast of Bodmin Moor, it was called. And then a whole load of stories came out from local farmers that lived on Bodmin Moor. The sorts of farmer that don't really court attention, press attention. So they're unlikely to have made these stories up. But over 100 sheep had been killed in the preceding years, about 10 years prior, from the maybe late 1970s, almost 10 years. And these sheep had been killed in a very specific way. They'd all been killed by being crushed on the neck, completely in keeping with a large cat, a big cat killing. Canines, dogs are very messy when they kill a lamb or a sheep. Big cats, not so much. And there were also footprints seen, big cat footprints that were seen in various points of the moor, not far from where I'm sat. So if you see something over my shoulder, you know, let me know in the comments, because that'll definitely work. So the theory is that in the 1970s, the laws on big cats changed for private owners, and all sorts of small zoos and circuses had to get rid of their animals. Now, destroying an animal is expensive, or you might not want to do it. So it's believed that a lot of local zoos in Cornwall and just over the border in Devon, such as Plymouth Zoo and a local circus just outside Plymouth, got rid of their big cats, because it is believed by wildlife experts that investigated the various sites that it was, in fact, a puma, a very large male puma. Other reports say a lynx or a panther, but almost certainly I would say a big cat that had been released. The beast of Bodmin Moor is still seen, but I don't think there's any evidence of big cats anymore on Bodmin Moor, so those are probably sightings of large domestic cats or shadows or badgers or something like that, or maybe something supernatural. Well, what about piskies then, or pixies as they're called in the rest of the West Country? These are the last of the Cornish little folk that I will talk about today. We've had the knockers, we've had the Spriggans, now it's the turn of the piskies. Now, piskies are a little bit different from pixies that we see just over the River Tamar in Devon. They're a little bit darker, they're a little bit more malevolent, but not as bad as Spriggans. They're generally good, especially if you leave offerings for them, just like the knockers. In appearance, they're usually described as little. In fact, the word pixie, or pisky in Cornwall, is usually thought to be a Proto-Brythonic, Proto-Celtic term meaning small. But there's also a sense in which, in the folklore, they've shrunk a bit over time. We see this with the elves, we see this with fairies, we see this with the Sidhe over in Ireland. It's quite a common phenomenon that what used to be gods, perhaps, have shrunk in stature and then become human-sized, another race of being that live beyond the veil, and eventually they'd become smaller and smaller and smaller, and then at some time in the 19th century or 18th century, they stop interacting with humans altogether. We see that in folklore all over these islands, that the little folk finally say, sod it, you big stupid sods aren't worth it. Just the same with piskies. And at this point, they're described as the size of your thumb and wearing very, very nice clothes, you know, with braces and nice ironed white shirts and shiny shoes. This feels like a more recent sort of addition. If you look at older stories, they're slightly bigger and they're wizened old men. That's their appearance. Wizened old men with a very childlike demeanour. All like that. Very similar to other little sprites that we see in Europe as a whole, particularly Northern Europe. You might compare the Swedish Tomte or the Danish Nisse as well. You know, diminutive little entities. Almost think like Christmas elves, Santa's elves. You know, little hoods and things like that. But again, earlier in the folklore, they're just wearing grubby little rags and things like that. They're also associated with wild places, particularly moorland, but also stone circles and burial mounds, a bit like Spriggans, but they're just less unpleasant. They'll do good things for humans, particularly humans they like, and some humans can see them, others can't. It depends if you've got the sight. And they'll just do nice things for you if you leave them little presents, little gifts, maybe some clean socks, or maybe a little bit of food. Some folklorists suggest that this might be a hangover from the pre-Christian religion, Celtic polytheism or Celtic animism, perhaps I should say, leaving food for the spirits so they won't come and mess with your life. You see the same thing in animist cultures today, whether it's in South America or Southeast Asia, what have you. So piskies, perhaps the remnants of old genie Loki, local spirits of place. That's my thoughts, anyway. Behind me, on the horizon, is Rao Tor, a granite outcrop, the highest peak on all of Bodmin Moor. Now, Rao Tor, which means rough Tor, which is also how it's spelt, has a bit of folklore attached to it. It is about King Mark. King Mark from the famous love story Tristan and Isuelt, a Cornish romance. Now, Mark was King of Cornwall during the days of King Arthur. In fact, King Arthur was Mark's cousin. But this story takes place when Mark was a boy. He was 14 and it was coming up to his 15th birthday. And because he was on the verge of being a man, his chamberlain came to him and said, "Mark, sire, what wish, what secret desire do you have that you would like to see fulfilled? Name it. Anything, and I personally will see if it can be fulfilled to you." And Mark thought for a bit, and well, there was something that he had always secretly wished for. He always wanted to touch the moon. So he spoke this desire to his chamberlain, and the chamberlain said, "It shall be done." So King Mark and all the court and the chamberlain, they all marched up Rao Tor, there in the distance. And the whole court went up, and Mark stood on the very top of Rao Tor, and they waited till evening. The stars came out and the moon sailed overhead, and King Mark reached up to try and touch it, and he almost reached the moon, but not quite. So the chamberlain commanded a table, a royal table from the palace be brought out, all the way from Tegeagle Castle. And it was brought all the way across the moor, and with great, effort, it was brought up by King Mark's various knights and servants and page boys, and it was placed on top of the door. And King Mark got on top of the table, and the next night the moon sailed by, and Mark reached out to try and touch it, and he almost touched it, but not quite. "Let all the tables in the land be brought here," said the chamberlain. And all the tables across Cornwall were all brought to Rao Tor, and they were all stacked one on top of the other, like that, like a big Jenga tower. And King Mark climbed all the way to the top, and then the moon sailed over the next night, and he reached out to touch it, and he almost touched it, but not quite. "Let the royal throne be brought up here," said the chamberlain. And King Mark's throne was brought all the way from Tegeagle across the moor, all the way up Rao Tor, placed on top of all those tables. King Mark climbed to the top. The next night the moon sailed by. He reached out to touch it. He almost touched it, but not quite. "Let all the chairs in all the land be brought here." So all the chairs from across Cornwall were all brought to that place, Rao Tor. Up, 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 up. The stack of chairs and tables was so tall, King Mark climbed all the way to the top and reached up. And the next night the moon sailed by, and he reached up, and his fingers just skimmed the underside of the moon. But alas, there were no more chairs and tables in all Cornwall. And King Mark, 14-year-old boy, said, "Whoever can help me touch the moon, I will make him king after me." Then King Mark's young page boy, just a child, his own nephew, no less, a page boy called Tristan. Yes, that Tristan. And the page boy piped up. He said, "I have a little footstool, Your Majesty." And the footstool was placed on top of the whole mountain of chairs and tables. King Mark climbed up, balanced on that little footstool given to him by Tristan the page boy, and the next night the moon sailed over, and Mark reached out and he grabbed it, with both hands, and he went sailing through the air, holding the moon, and he climbed up on top, and he sat on the moon as it went all the way around the world. And King Mark saw everything. He saw the lands of Ind, the Spice Island, he saw the Americas, he saw China, he saw everything. He saw dragons dancing in the deep. And then the next day, when the moon sailed back round, King Mark was sat there in his princely clothes, a little bit wiser for all the things he had seen. And he hopped off the moon, And his court asked him, what is the moon like? You're the only one to ever see it. And he said, the moon is made of Cornish yarg, and the seas are all made of Cornish clotted cream. And what about the page boy, Tristan? Well, that, my friends, is in the story of Tristan and Isuelt, which I have told in this channel before. I'll put a link to it here. Thank you. King Arthur has strong links with Cornwall, being a Celtic nation. Some traditions say King Arthur is from Cornwall, born at Tegeagle, and some say the site of his final battle was right here on Bodmin Moor, the Battle of Camlan, and the river Camel is not far from here, so linguistically it makes sense. So at the final battle, King Arthur battled Mordred, his arch nemesis. And Mordred was slain in battle by King Arthur, but King Arthur was mortally wounded, and he was lying somewhere in a field in Bodmin, some say by Slaughterhouse. And one of his bravest knights, Sir Bedivere, took Excalibur, King Arthur's sword, and King Arthur said to Sir Bedivere, cast Excalibur into that lake. So Sir Bedivere took Excalibur to the shores of this very lake behind me, Domazy Pool. But he could not bear to throw such a beautiful sword into the water. It was the sword of the Lady of the Lake. It was a magic sword. It had saved the Britons many times in battle. So instead he hid it in the grass, just here somewhere perhaps, and went back and told King Arthur that he had thrown the sword into the pool, just like he had been commanded. And King Arthur asked Sir Bedivere, what happened? And Sir Bedivere said, well, nothing, it just went plop in the water. And King Arthur said, you lie! I knew you wouldn't have the bravery and strength of will to throw the sword in the lake. Go and throw it properly in the lake this time. So Sir Bedivere went back, took the sword out of the reeds, and was just about to throw it in the lake again, but again he couldn't do it. He couldn't throw such a lovely sword into the water. But he went back and said to King Arthur that he had done. And King Arthur said, what happened? And Sir Bedivere said, well, the sword went high in the air and plopped in the... You liar, said King Arthur. I command you, I, King of the Britons, command you to throw the sword in the lake, or I will put a curse on your head. And Sir Bedivere, the third and final time, went, took out the shining sword, Excalibur, and flung it high into the air above this pool, and it caught the sunlight, illuminating the cross on the hilt, and tumbled down, down, down towards the surface of the water, and just before it went plop, a white hand emerged from the water and grasped the sword upright like that, and slowly drew it back into the water. It was, of course, the Lady of the Lake, reclaiming the magic sword that she had bestowed on the once and future king all those years before. This is the pool of the Lady of the Lake. And King Arthur, mortally wounded, was taken to Avalon, some say Glastonbury Tor in Somerset, but in this version it's down the River Camel and across the sea. And he never returned to Cornwall in human form again. But he can, of course, always be seen in bird form, because King Arthur is, of course, the Cornish Chough, national symbol of Cornwall. Are you looking for Excalibur, babe? That is probably little flecks of King Arthur's sword. Can you sniff the Lady of the Lake? Is that good, buddy? So, my friends, that is the end of the video. Thank you for staying for the folklore of Cornwall if you made it all the way through the video. So if you are familiar with Cornwall and the folklore of Cornwall, you may notice I've made quite a large omission in this video. I haven't really told the story of Tristan and Isuelt, the most famous Cornish romance. That's because I've already told that story on this channel, so I'll put a link to that video here. It's in 3 parts. The first part is called The Moorholt out of Ireland. So we've heard about some Irish Christian missionaries. This is a story about some nasty Irish pirates and raiders that were always at the Cornishmen's throats in the days of King Arthur. Speaking of King Arthur, we've touched on King Arthur in this video. If you would like to journey into the tradition of King Arthur, why not watch this video, the oldest story of King Arthur? That's all we've got time for, folks. See you next time.